Really, this is going to be a perfect follow-up to what we just discussed with Kim Schreier. She kind of set the field perfectly for us to jump right in and talk about all of the different cool advocacy things that are happening in Washington State and around the country, and then maybe how you can get a little bit more involved in your own personal advocacy efforts as well. So my name is Madi Johnson. For those of you who don't know me, I've been volunteering with Connected for several years and now with Connected in Camp Leo. And I absolutely love this community. I recently became the legislative lead for T1 International, which is a patient advocacy group for people living with an international patient advocacy group for people living with type 1 diabetes and all kinds of diabetes as well. So I'm really excited to share a little bit about what our Washington State chapter is doing and talk with all of you guys about what advocacy efforts you're engaging in. Jake, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm so pleased to be here with Madi today. Madi and I had the chance to do a presentation like this, one of the summer camp programs actually for Camp Leo. And we're really excited to bring it to a broader community today. I've been involved with Connected in Camp Leo for a while as well, but the reason that I'm here in an advocacy format is that I worked in Congress for almost a decade, and I currently am the president of a lobbying firm based here in Seattle and working in Washington, D.C. I work on healthcare issues for hospitals, and I work for public agencies like cities in the state of Washington. So from these two perspectives, we hope that we can talk to you a little bit about what some of the issues are that are going on out there, and then also what are the most effective tools in advocacy to really make your voice heard.
Yeah.
Madi, back to you.
Sweet. Thanks, Jake. Well, as you can see, we are in, a more discussion gallery style session here. I definitely don't love to, well, I shouldn't say I don't love to preach, because let's be real, sometimes I do love to preach, but I love to also have conversation. So I'm hoping that you'll feel confident, get yourself off mute, and chat with us today, because really this dialogue is meant for all of us to come together, talk about what we're doing, and maybe get a little inspiration from each other too. So I'm going to open this up with a question here. A lot of y'all don't have your images up, but give me a little hand raise, show of hands, if you think of yourself as an advocate. Okay. I see some hands. Oh, nice. People coming off the video. Oh, I got a thumbs up. Awesome. Cool. So we got some advocates here. I love that. Does someone want to feel brave to share like their first time where they're like, this is when I felt like I was advocating? This moment stuck in my brain as my first time advocating for myself.
Hi. My 13-year-old son's type 1, I'm not. And I think he was already ADHD, and I was dealing with a 504 plan. And we happened to live in Snohomish School District here in Washington State, which is a phenomenal school district. And we were so fortunate to have a nurse already at his elementary school. And I think that my first foray into advocacy was really, taking what I already knew from the 504 with his ADHD and working with the nurse and the school district, and being fortunate to not have some of the horror stories that I've read in like the Polk community, especially in like Seattle school district, not if anybody's in Seattle, sorry. But, really learning that, yes, he can have his phone in his classroom and all those things, and being willing to talk to the teachers that weren't honoring that. And I think that was my first foray. And I'm not actually a shy, quiet person to begin with. And, I have just the one only precious son. And he's by right able to have these, with the ADA. And I think a lot of us as a parent, and just kind of learning in how this goes, is learning that it is okay to not be, let's say, a BITCH, but to be a strong advocate and to realize that if I don't do it, nobody else is. And I think that's the first foray I have had into it.
Thank you for sharing that, Tina. I love so many nuggets of what you just shared. And I'm grateful that your son has you as a strong advocate, and hopefully he can take some of those things with him too. And advocacy, like you shared, starts in the schools, right? With advocating for what our kiddos need and our young adults need in the classroom. And, you know, I kind of see that with work too, like with us professionals advocating for what you need in a work setting. And something else that I love that you mentioned is that it takes some strength to be an advocate, right? Don't got to be a BITCH, but you got to be strong and be passionate. So I love that you kind of pulled that in there. Thanks, Tina. Anyone else want to share a story where they're like, yeah, I was advocating in this moment?
I'd like to make a comment based on Tina's story that just maybe talks about advocacy. Sometimes we think about like advocating for the law, or we advocate for policy, or we do these things, right? And we want to put them in historical context, right? Like this is the law that was created in the past, you know, that protects us here in the present. And this is what we want to change moving into the future. And I guess I just want to emphasize as loudly and as strongly as I can that all of those protections that Tina just advocated for are recent laws that were changed ridiculously short in terms of a historical context. You didn't have these protections 20 years ago. You didn't have these protections 12 years ago. In the state of Washington, you had these protections about 11 years ago when a group of people went to Olympia and protected a kid's right to treat their disease, their type 1 diabetes, in the classroom with appropriate supervision. And prior to that, kids would be either forced to go to a different school where medical care could be provided, or would be forced to take care of their healthcare issues outside of a classroom setting. You treat kids with diabetes differently. This is a law that people in the state of Washington passed. And we're not talking about something that was done in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s. This is like literally in our adult lifetimes. And I say that because it brings us to the present, which is that we have rights right now in the state of Washington and across the country that are also recent. It was the Affordable Care Act, which is less than a decade old, that gave people with diabetes access to insurance coverage, not affordability. We're not even dealing with the ability to afford insurance. We're dealing with the right to be able to purchase it in the marketplace. And these are rights that are under attack right now, right today. We're not building on a 50-year history of legislative rights. We have been building this kind of one by one, and they're under attack in this moment today. And I say that not to be scary, but I say that to also respect the work that happened. Tina, your ability to advocate for your son and to get a 504 plan that protects his ability to take care of his disease in the classroom is because a bunch of angry parents before you picked this fight. And when you pick this fight in the Snohomish School District, you're making it better for the next kid who comes through, not just with type 1, but with AF or MS or kind of whatever they need to be in the classroom and to be successful. And like you have just taken that work that was done in the past, you have cemented it into this practice with you and your family, which is great for you guys, but it also paves the way for the next family down the way. And thank you so much for doing that.
I love that. Thanks, Jake.
So there's a lot, there's different kinds, right? Because yeah, when you're in school, for example, and you have people's care and you're not there, how safety that is more, you know, like a grander scale, I guess it's more in a political arena. Recently, I have been writing to Republican senators. I've just been sending them, I mean, I hate to call it junk mail, but I've been like spamming them. and specifically the Republican senators, because I am trying to advocate for them to not allow for a new nomination for the Supreme Court. I find that this is important to preserve my own rights as a woman and as a type 1 person with pre-existing conditions, because they have the power to overturn a lot of things. So I've been doing that a lot. I've been going to protests. I've been going to protests for years now. I know there's kind of a reawakening in this country recently, but you know, I started going to protests a long time ago, I think since like the elections in 2016. I felt the need to just get out there in the streets. I know it's harder right now because there is COVID and we are at risk. So it's something that a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing, but I just felt like I need to put on my mask and I just need to get out there and keep my distance, but still, you know, kind of show of numbers. So that's been something I've been doing. I used to be kind of shy about showing my devices and showing, you know, now I'm like, no, like just proud. I'm just showing them in public. I feel like that's a part of advocacy. Like I want to show people like, hey, you know what? Like, sure, I have this invisible disease. I look healthy. I look young, but I'm not. Like, I have this device on me. Ask me about it. Like, yeah, like, and people have, and some people have recognized exactly what it was, which surprised me because they weren't type 1, but they knew somebody else with type 1. So just starting that conversation, showing that you're out there, showing that, you know, you may look healthy, but we're out there. Like we have this condition. We need affordable insulin. We need affordable care. Those are the things that if you're showing that you have type 1, it's like people are aware. People are like, oh my God, yeah, there are those people out there, you know, who need those things. Like it's not like this concept, you know, those are people in my life. So that's what I'm doing that.
Maya, thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, that hits so many levels and really is teeing us up perfectly, because there are so many different ways to advocate and kind of different levels is what I'm hearing too. Like maybe your passive advocacy is wearing your devices loud and proud. And we'll talk more about like different ways to advocate later on, a little bit later, but there are these different levels, right? It's you can wear your devices out loud. You can write letters to senators. You can go out and protest. You can sign petitions, right? There's all these different levels of advocacy. And sometimes it's legislative advocacy, like you said, writing letters. And sometimes it's more personal advocacy, like Tina's story of advocating for her son and wearing your devices loud and proud. So there's so many different ways to advocate for yourself. Me personally, whenever I drive through a fast food place, which yes, I do sometimes, and get a Coke, a Diet Coke, I'll drink a sip first and make sure that it's diet, right? Has anyone returned a Coke because it's not a Diet Coke? Oh my gosh, I hate to admit it's been so many times, but that's another form of advocacy. So there are so many different levels, and it starts kind of by finding your voice and what advocacy means to you. I mean, advocacy is defined, right, as one who defends a cause, and your cause can be insulin affordability, or it can be your own personal right to be a healthy human in the world and to advocate for what you need. So there are so many different ways to advocate. And Maya, sounds like you're doing the full spectrum of them. Yeah. Anyone else want to share how they've been advocating for themselves recently? Maybe one more.
I'll share. So I'm coming up on my 8th anniversary in November, and thank you. I recently was having some conversations with some of my extended family about diabetes and living with type 1 and what that looks like. And I didn't realize actually how little that they knew, and it isn't because I don't like I take care of whatever needs I need to wherever I am. So if I needed to give myself insulin, like I would just do those things. But since I got the Omnipod pump, you don't see me giving shots as much anymore, things like that. So it wasn't as visible, even though, I'm almost always wearing my CGM on my arms or things like that. All of that is to say, I was having these conversations with them about what it means to live with type 1 and the impact on my daily life. And my aunt asked me about something I had shared on social media, which was that post going around how people living with type 1 make, I think it's like 180 decisions specific to type 1 diabetes every day. And just putting a number with that and giving them some scope of what it is that I'm dealing with every single day was just really mind blowing for them. And a couple of my aunts looked at me and they just said, I had no idea. I had no idea that you spend that much of your day occupied by type 1. And I said, yeah, because it impacts everything. It is a part of every single thing that I do. And so just having the opportunity to share with them what that's like, and giving them the opportunity to learn more so that they understand how important it is that I don't have to fight for access to insulin. I don't have to fight for access to the devices that I need to help manage those 180 decisions that I have to make every single day, right? So if we can advocate for those things and fight for those things and access for that, then it makes it easier for us to manage those other decisions that we are going to have to make.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what I'm hearing here too is notice what's your sphere of influence, right? And for you and for a lot of us, of course, it's our families, it's the people that we're around all the time, and those are the first people that we need to educate about type 1. I also, Catherine, have been going through this realization of how many people in my family, extended family, don't know much about diabetes, and in my work community and my spiritual community. So these conversations that you're having around type 1 are so important, because it's a lot easier to deny us what we need when our problems are invisible. Maybe problems isn't the right word, when our struggles are invisible. So I so appreciate that, Catherine. And it's such an awesome place to start with your advocacy efforts, because there's that little bit of comfortability with your family and with your community, before you get out into the stuff where you're writing letters to senators like Maya, maybe calling them out a little bit more. And so I want to think about these advocacy efforts that we all just talked about and relate it back to what's going on in the world. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the United States and around the world. And I'm curious, like in the perspectives of everyone on this call, kind of what's happening in the world and how does it relate to diabetes?
That's a big question.
That's a big question. Jake, why don't you take a stab at it?
Well, I think we heard from Congresswoman Schreier, in the previous session that I think access to health insurance, because the Affordable Care Act is legitimately under threat right now, I think is the number one issue in my mind. I think if we don't have access to health insurance due to our pre-existing conditions, every other issue is secondary to that. I really do believe that.
Yeah. And so the Affordable Care Act is the act that they're referring to, right? That is under attack. Has anyone hearing about this in the news? How is diabetes represented in the news these days?
It's not.
It's not. Yeah.
Really? Not in mainstream, not in the regular news. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of just an issue all in itself, right? And it makes us have to really search for these news and think about the content that you're taking in and how you're getting this information so that we can advocate accordingly. But the Affordable Care Act, just to reiterate one more time, is a really terrifying, that they are looking to repeal all of these different, parts that help people with type 1 diabetes and all people living with chronic illness. So definitely should be at the front of our mind. And for me, also, it really reiterates the need for representation for people with all different types of diabetes, because as we know, the fight for insulin affordability, the fight for durable medical equipment like continuous glucose monitors, that affects all people with diabetes. And if we can come together and focus on, working together on these issues, then hopefully we can increase that representation of why all of these things are so important.
Can I bring up one other issue too? For those,
Yeah.
just in case it's of question, we're not saying that the Affordable Care Act is under potential attack. There's a lawsuit before the Supreme Court right now. The Supreme Court is expected to hear and rule the week after the election. So this is within the next 30 days. We are going to see kind of if these protections are going to stay in place or not. This is not a future imaginary problem kind of that we have. It's not a bogeyman in the closet. This is a present and pertinent threat. And there is not a plan in Congress or in the White House today to replace these protections if the Affordable Care Act is ruled unconstitutional. I want to say that because I also want to bridge to, it's not just the top ticket issues, right? It's not just the Affordable Care Act. It's not just insulin pricing. It's things like workplace discrimination. It's things like having your kid have access to educational opportunities without the need to sequester themselves away from other kids. It's also fetal cell research. The same Supreme Court, if they overturn this, they are likely to overturn the ability to use fetal cells as a way to do medical research, which is where the most promising therapeutic research is being done right now in type 1 diabetes. All of these issues are directly related to policy and having an engaged type 1 community.
Jake, we have a question from Lauren. What are effective messages for Republican senators to affect the ACA right now?
Jake, sorry, I also got to give a shout out because I'm sitting here with my mother-in-law who is from Alaska, where they have Republican representatives, and she used to work advocating back in the 90s for her son, my husband, who has type 1. So I just need to give Betsy a shout out for all that work that she did before us.
Thank you.
But yeah, is anything effective? Are any messages better than others? Like, give us some talking points.
Yeah, I have a really strong opinion about this, and I'm curious what you all think. Here's my perspective. We passed the Affordable Care Act, and then you ready for this? There were 67 votes in the House of Representatives to repeal it. And let me tell you what we collectively did, all of us as a diabetes community, and not just a diabetes community, but as a chronic illness community. So all of us, the Heart Association, the Kidney Foundation, MS, arthritis, all of us, here is what we did. Oh God, don't hurt us. Don't take this away from us. Oh, thank God they didn't have the votes. Oh God, don't hurt us again. Don't hurt us again. Oh, thank God they didn't have the votes. And we did that 67 times. And what we never, ever did at any point in this conversation was hold any single member of Congress accountable for trying to take away those rights. We were a defensive community with a defensive message that basically said, please don't hurt us. Thank you for not hurting us. And none of us ever asked the question, why the fuck are you trying to hurt us? And this notion of accountability is missing in the advocacy community right now. You know what I mean? The activist in me wants to see a billboard in Republican members of Congress's districts that says, why don't you think I deserve healthcare? Just explain it to me. I would like you to answer that question, because I have never heard a member of Congress effectively articulate a message that says, Jake Johnston doesn't deserve healthcare. But that's what the policies would do. So that is what I would like to see the message being to those Republican members of Congress. I don't think there's an effective one that says, please God, don't hurt us. I don't think that is an effective strategy because it hasn't worked for 67 prior votes. I think the only effective message is to say, hey, listen, in a rational voice and with a rational thing, like, I don't really understand. Why don't you think I deserve access to healthcare? Explain it to me. And we as a community have not taken that aggressive message. And I'd like to try. Forgive my language. I get a little riled up about this.
Thanks, Jake. I'm surprised you didn't go on for longer because I know how passionate you are about the ACA. And thank you for asking that question, Lauren, because yeah, this is so crucial. And for Jake reiterating that this is happening right now. This isn't a what if, it's a what will, you know? And what's exciting and terrifying is that we have it in our power to do something, to reach out to our elected officials and tell them what we want. That is what they're there for. And yeah, it is just so crucially important right now. Yeah, Jake.
But one more thing, Maddie, it's not just telling them what we need and what we're there for, but then it's holding them accountable when they actively vote against us. And that is where not just the type 1 diabetes community, not just the people on this call, but that is where the broader problem has been for us. Our patient community broadly across every disease has not taken that extra step to go and hold people accountable for trying to hurt us. And
I have a question about that.
One more point, just like, I am not suggesting that we take these type of aggressive tactics that other organizations do, but every single person on this call knows what the NRA does if any of their friendly members of Congress votes against them, right? Why don't we do that? I'm sorry, question?
Yeah, well, my question was, what does holding people accountable look like? If, like, I don't know, like, what would that look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I think Maddie's going to talk about kind of effective ways to communicate with members of Congress. And I'd be happy when we get to that section to put a layer on that has this question specifically in mind. I think I think everybody can do something. And I don't think expecting people to go from not doing anything to like I would like to testify before Congress as a policy expert on this issue. I think there's a gazillion incremental steps in between these points, right? So let's when Maddie gets to this point of the presentation, let me put an accountability layer on this. And I think let's dive in deep because I love it. I'd love to see people holding members of Congress accountable for what they do.
Yeah, well, let's cruise through what we're going to get through and then talk about how we can advocate and kind of dive into that meaty part of it. But first, I think Jake and I both feel we want to chat just really briefly about other organizations that are patient advocates for people with type 1 diabetes. So might be familiar with kind of the players in the diabetes landscape. We have JDRF, we have ADA, Beyond Type 1, T1 International, and an organization called DPAC, the Diabetes Patient Advocacy something. And so all of these groups are working to advocate for people living with diabetes. And some are doing better than others, some are doing more than others. But it's obviously leaving a really big gap for people like us who are advocating in other ways. Jake, I don't know if you want to bring up our slide here. Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Has anyone worked with these organizations in terms of advocacy efforts?
Can you all see this? So these are the 4 main groups that are active in advocacy at a national and at a state level. And just from our perspective, these are our notes. these are kind of what they do well and maybe where some of the holes are kind of in the gap. Maddie, take it away.
Yeah. So I think, you definitely, I would encourage everyone, if you're looking to get more into advocacy, there are so many different organizations that you can work with. So it's kind of like, we'll go through these briefly, but then you can do some of your own research to dive more into what these groups are doing. JDRF is working more at only a federal level, so not a state level. And their priorities are, one of them, Promise to Remember Me campaign to, help keep the idea of diabetes on our representative minds. They also work with advocating for the special diabetes program, but although that funding has been cut to the minimum, so, and that's only at the federal level. So Jake, do you have anything else you want to add about JDRF?
Well, I think JDRF, kind of consistent with their mission, they're focused on research and they're focused on research funding. They're the preeminent kind of advocacy organization for type 1 as it relates to research and research related policy. So things like fetal cell issues, things like FDA approval, things like device acceleration kind of through governmental regulatory bodies, JDRF's at the top of the list. The problem, or the whole rather, maybe not a problem, is that so many health care decisions are being made at a state level right now. So there's a gap between where the action is right now and where the emphasis of JDRF is.
Yes. Differently, the American Diabetes Association does advocate at a state level, and they're doing some interesting things for affordable insulin campaigns. And they, as we know, represent all different types of diabetes, not just type 1 diabetes. Then we are DPAC, Diabetes Patient Advocacy Coalition, and they have a little bit more activist representation and a little bit more diverse policy for their advocacy. And then T1 International, I'm biased because I volunteer very closely with them, but they are just a patient advocacy group that does not accept money from big pharmaceutical companies and organizations. So JDRF and the ADA do accept money from major pharmaceutical companies that are the ones pricing insulin so extensively. And as we heard, Congresswoman Schreier mentioned, she does not take money from these pharmaceutical companies because it sounds like she doesn't think you can advocate effectively if you do. So I'm gonna leave that there. And T1 International is an international group, but right now in the US, they're really focusing obviously on the affordability crisis that we're focusing on. And I can definitely share more about that in a little bit. Jake?
Yeah, I just want to add 2 quick notes. The ADA is probably the preeminent organization in terms of what your legal rights are as a person with a chronic illness. And they've built a really effective kind of state by state and a national campaign to protect the legal rights to employment, to education, and non-discrimination practices. And they were one of the leads behind the Americans with Disabilities Act, kind of way back in 1990, that created some of these protections. So when you think of like the Safe at School campaigns and your right to have different types of employment at a federal level, the ADA has usually been the lead kind of entity pushing for that. The second note is just that all 4 of these organizations provide information to you as a potential advocate with type 1 diabetes. They all have advocacy mailing lists. They have the ability to sign up on their websites and to get kind of information. And you're going to see different points of emphasis that they all have. But I think from our standpoint, more information is better. And by all means, visit each of them and sign up.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jake. And so knowing that these are the major players, knowing that you can get involved in advocacy at any of these levels, I think now is a great time to jump into what are all the different ways to get involved. Jake, if you want to throw that slide up. And we're stealing this from Jake's presentation because it's awesome. And it really is laid out in such a perfect way to see the effects of your advocacy, and also just to see, you know, what level are you ready for in this moment, knowing, like Jake said, it's a ladder, right? You might not dive into the deep end. It's going to take steps to kind of build up your advocacy journey here. So there are so many different ways, and Jake, I'm going to let you describe this slide.
Yeah, so this slide was created, I like that we described it as a ladder, Maddie, because our hope is that whatever people with type 1 diabetes do as advocates, or whatever they've done in the past, that we'd like everybody to take one more rung on the ladder. And so kind of this slide is set up in a color-coded way to basically say, what is the amount of time that it takes to do these different steps? And also, what is the impact of them? So for example, signing a petition has low impact and takes no time. Tweeting something has low impact and takes no time, right? So we're you know, as we kind of go through these bands from top to bottom, it takes a lot more of your time, but it also has a much greater impact. And going back to the conversation that we delayed from earlier, this applies to your accountability as well. You know, it is actually easy. If you're doing nothing right now to hold members of Congress accountable for trying to like take away your healthcare, then by all means, do something that takes no time and has low impact, but it's more than you were doing. Tweet at them on social media and say, hey, Congressman, why don't you think I deserve healthcare? Again, will it have a major impact? No. Is it more than you were doing? Yes. If you're already doing something like that, okay, well now let's go to where Kim Schreier was talking about this morning. What are things that actually stick in her brain as a member of Congress? And they're the personal letters. It's the personal communication, and it's the personal story. And if you can do that, which takes more of your time, it has more of an impact. And if you're already doing that, all right, well now let's do a letter to the editor. Believe it or not, people, elected officials, still get clips every day from the newspapers that are in their districts. If you can write a letter to the editor and get it published in the Bellingham Herald or the Yakima Sun or the Walla Walla Union Bulletin or the Anchorage Daily News, you know, that says, I don't understand why Congressman Young voted to take away my ability to access healthcare. And when I contacted the office, they didn't respond. I'm just asking a simple question. Why does the congressman think I don't deserve access to healthcare? That letter showing up in a newspaper that frankly nobody reads anymore, but that member of Congress does, is incredibly effective, but it takes a lot of your time. And the most effective use of your time and the hardest thing to do is to show up and have that conversation in person. Ask for a meeting, show up at a town hall. It is the hardest thing to do as an advocate, and it is the one that has the greatest impact. So don't jump if you're not doing that. If you're doing nothing, jump to the easiest band up there. Do one thing more. And if you're in that band, do one thing in the band below that. Take one more step on the ladder. That's the pitch.
Thanks, Jake. And what I will say is recently, as I dove into the legislative lead role at T1 International, I started, more directly reaching out to senators and representatives. I've sent emails before that were more like what we're talking, kind of just telling them my passions and why these issues are important. But more recently, I've been asking them for meetings and saying, this is why I'm passionate about insulin costs, and this is why you need to meet with me to discuss these things. And it can definitely be intimidating. But now, especially, things all happen by Zoom, so there's a little less of that commitment to meet someone in person. But really, our representatives are here, like we've said before, to listen to you, to hear about what your concerns are, because you're voting for them. And if you're writing a letter to the Bellevue Gazette or whatever you said, Bellingham, that's gonna mess with their re-election plan, maybe, right? And so knowing that your voice has power with these representatives and senators really helped bridge that gap for me, at least, reaching out to these different elected officials in Washington state. And they want to listen to you. And at first I thought, gosh, what do I know about policy? What do I know, about legislation? But what we do know about is our diabetes. We know maybe what it feels like to ration your insulin. I know I've been there. And so you are a expert of your experience, and learning how to share your story in a powerful way and relay that information to your senators. That's your expertise. And they want to hear this. They want to hear what issues are important to you. So I would say, if you're feeling like you want to climb the top of the ladder, then I would so encourage you to reach out to your state representatives, your district representatives, and let them know what issues are important to you.
Maddie, it's your call. Do I get to play my favorite video or not?
You can play your favorite video. I think Julie had a question about our representatives. Yeah, and I kind of have this question for you too, Jake. Kim Schreier made it sound like Washington State is all on board re the ACA. How can we advocate outside of our state on this issue? What do you think, Jake?
I think it's really hard. And I think it is, listen, the fact of the matter is that if you write a letter to an elected official who does not represent you, they don't have an obligation to pay attention. I mean, that's just the reality. I hate that that's true, but it is. So we combat that by building a community that has representation from a lot of different geographic areas. And, it's not just people with type 1, it's the people who love us and care about us. If you've got friends that live in other states, ask them to send a letter on your behalf. Hey, I got a friend with type 1 diabetes. Why do you think Jake shouldn't have healthcare? I don't understand your vote. I mean, you can ask your broader community to advocate on your behalf. And in doing so, we create a geographical representation that makes it effective. We were asked the question earlier, like accountability. Can I just show you how it works in real life? This is my favorite video ever. I don't know who this woman is. I don't know her. She's my personal hero. If I could make a coffee cup of her, I would do so. But I'm just going to play it for you so you can see what happened. This is in 2019. Senator Grassley is the longest serving member in the Senate. And Senator Grassley is the chair of the committee that has jurisdiction over healthcare policy. And this is a woman in Iowa showing up to a town meeting and asking a question.
What is your plan to make sure Americans like myself covered, those of us with pre-existing conditions, people who are on their parents' insurance, and again, people like myself who need life-guaranteeing medication? We will lose our insurance, and I probably be dead in 2 months.
Well, there's a lot of, and she's asking only because the courts may declare it unconstitutional. I don't think the courts are going to declare it unconstitutional.
You've voted 7 times to repeal.
Yes.
Why? What are you going to do for people like myself?
Well, first of all, it's not going to get repealed.
I mean, I'm going to ask you, let me restate my question. I want you to answer me personally, as a person whose life depends on insurance.
Sure.
I would be dead in 60 days or less without the Affordable Care Act.
Is it because of pre-existing?
Yes, and because of life guarantee medication.
There's no question about keeping pre-existing conditions in the market.
It's only if Affordable Care Act guarantees that.
If that's your question. And so the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and it's not going to be repealed by Congress. Do you think it's going to be repealed tomorrow?
You continue to vote for repeal.
The last time we voted for repeal was when McCain voted the other way, and there's no chance of repealing it now. Besides, if we pass in the Senate, we'll get it through the United States House of Representatives. So what are you worried about?
Okay, so I did not have to vote on it. You're threatening my life. I asked Senator Grassley yesterday why he'd voted 7 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act and why he wouldn't come up with a proposal that would cover with insurance people like myself with pre-existing conditions. I don't know why that question was so hard to answer. I'm still waiting for the answer from him.
So amazing. It really is an incredible representation of holding elected officials accountable. And really, I hate to say it, but the confrontation that it takes to say, why are you not prioritizing my life, right? Because that's what it's boiling down to, is our livelihood. And gosh, that woman is just my idol. Thanks, Jake, for sharing that video. So we have, we have 13 minutes left in the session, and I want to make sure that we have answered any questions or have had any discussions that people are hungry to have about advocacy. I think we've definitely dove into all the different ways that you can maybe take one step on the advocacy ladder. We've talked a lot about the Affordable Care Act and why that's really one of the most pressing issues for people with pre-existing conditions, for people with chronic illnesses. There's also the huge barrier of insulin affordability in our country that we really haven't talked as much about on this call. I know T1 International that's their main priority, is to lower the list price of insulin. And I could talk for the next 3 hours about T1 International and what we're working on. But does anyone have any other questions about the Affordable Care Act, how to hold people accountable, or representatives, about reaching out to representatives? Yeah.
I was going to say, it wasn't mentioned, probably because you guys just assume it, but don't forget to vote on an individual level. That's one of the most important things you can do. And I signed up to volunteer with Vote Forward this year, sending letters to people who may not vote, which is, they're nonpartisan, so it's just encouraging people to get out there and vote, but that's another way to do it.
Way to go.
Yeah, thank you.
And don't forget, you're not just voting for the president, right? There's a whole lot of other people on that ballot and a lot of other amendments and propositions, and everything counts. The president is not the only one that makes decisions. We want to make sure that we put the right people where they should be.
I mean, if we could flip the Senate, that's almost more important, arguably. Sorry, that got partisan.
That's okay. Julie, do you have something you want to add?
It's really ill-formed, but I'm just thinking about, I don't know how to say it quickly. I'm super terrified about this ACA thing and how quickly that it's going to happen or may happen. And it feels so big and global. And so we have so little time that I feel like who is the big, I feel like we have to stage something really huge. We've got to protest this. I mean, this affects so many people on every side, I don't know who can help us organize that though. I feel like it's so much bigger than me. And yes, what I do is important. And I hear that, and I'm going to do that too. I feel how do we march on DC about this? Do you know what I mean? Who helps us organize something really big on this issue? And I feel I don't know where to go to even start moving something like that. I know that might be too big of a question, but that's where my head is.
If I can jump in with an opinion here, I want to say that there's a mindset that needs to be changed in our community. And again, I'm a bit of an incrementalist, I'll be honest, right? It's not about jumping from zero to like marching on DC with torches and pitchforks, although I'm totally in when that happens. It's moving kind of incrementally towards these steps. And I think our problem, and I will repeat myself, our problem is that our advocacy response as a community has been, oh, please don't hurt us. Oh, thank God we avoided that problem. And then we shut up and go away and we hope that they won't hurt us again. That has been the official policy of all of the health organizations. And I think moving us internally to a position of accountability is the biggest change we can make. And if our DC based and our state capital based advocacy organizations don't start holding members of Congress and elected officials accountable for trying to take away rights and protections for us, that is the shift. And I would be asking the people you donate money to, not elected officials, I mean your diabetes organizations. I would be changing that mindset inside of these organizations. That is what will change. And I will tell you, you know who made the biggest impact in the Affordable Care Act in the Senate? It wasn't the ADA, JDRF, MS, arthritis, labor unions. It wasn't those guys. It was the disability community who, you may remember this from the media, but it was people who literally took their bodies out of their wheelchairs and sat and laid in the hallways of Congress and made Mitch McConnell remove people by literally carrying their paralyzed bodies out of the Capitol. That was crazy activism. And those activists absolutely made a difference. Now, I'm not saying we go do this. And that is also, it's a privileged place to be able to fly to DC and sit in those hallways and take time off work. And not everybody can do that. Everybody can post something to their socials. Everybody can vote. Everybody can do one thing more than they're doing today. And if all of us collectively do one thing more, that's where the incrementalism works. Whatever you're doing today, and this is, I'm looking in the mirror when I say this, it's not enough because they keep coming for us. So you got to do one thing more.
I see Lauren's hand and then Nick's hand.
Hey, I'm also, by the way, thank you guys. This is great. I'm cognizant that we're getting low on time, but I would love if you guys could comment on like the role of intersectionality in this movement. Like you just mentioned, like the disability community stepping up. And one thing that I'm struggling with advocacy right now is, you know, the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement, the importance of, you know, people of color being brutally killed by police. And they also are affected by healthcare. And, you know, my friends are in danger. And one thing that I struggle with is I absolutely type 1 is like number 1 on my advocacy list. But I also cognizant of like the political movement. Like I don't want to, you know, dilute advocacy, but I also know that it's all interrelated. So I'm just kind of struggling with our role in these issues that are so intersectional and interdependent. And what's your advice on like coalitions or effective messaging for that sort of thing? So thanks. I'm just been struggling with that recently.
Yeah, I think that is such an important question, and thank you for bringing it up. And I feel we should have brought that in earlier to the conversation because how important it is here. I think we could host a whole, you know, retreat long conference on really what that means and what intersectionality means. For the sake of time, I'm going to just share personally as someone who is really invested in like racial equality and equity, and who was in the streets, you know, advocating for the Black lives earlier this year. I find that oh God, okay, in 1 minute, how am I going to say this? People with diabetes, it is our Black and brown brothers and sisters, BIPOC, are more likely to be affected by losing insurance they are more subject to the high price of insulin because of these different things, because of institutionalized racism. Like there's no real easy way to break that down. But I know as a white woman in this country, I found that my space is the diabetes community. If I can help our brothers and sisters in this country who are more likely to lose health insurance because of the ACA or need copay caps for their insurance, then I feel like that's our space in racial justice right now. So short answer, long to a really huge question. Jake, do you have one thing to add? And then I want to get to Nick's question.
Yeah, I think all of these threads get wrapped up into a very sophomoric response, but I think it's important. Accountability, intersectionality, coalition building. I think I want to see the biggest thing that we can do collectively to address all of these issues simultaneously is to change the way we advocate. From the traditional advocacy is, dear member of Congress, please support S Bill 42.9 to protect these issues. Please tell me you will vote yes for this, right? Or, we need to throw all that out the window. And the new advocacy is just asking why. It is a 2-word campaign, and it is an advocacy campaign within our health organizations that we currently belong to. It's an advocacy campaign within the communities in which we live and serve. It's an advocacy campaign in your doctor's office when you can just ask the question. It's not, hey, I want you to write a script for me to get this new technology. The question becomes, why can't I get this? Why are you a barrier to my access to care? When you ask why, you create access and you create intersectionality. And you should ask your type 1 organizations, why are there only white people on this call? Whatever's important to you, ask why. That is I think it's an open-ended advocacy strategy, but it's also a way to keep accountability at the forefront of these conversations.
Thanks, Jake. All right, I want to get to Nick's question, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Nick, I hope it's a quick one.
So really, it's basically I attended this talk last year, and I've been thinking a lot about what Jake said, specifically on the changing the mindset, and I'm just going to say it's done a lot better for like my own personal advocacy within my community, like asserting my right to exist as a human with the same rights and protections that everyone else has. I think this actually a little bit ties into what Lauren was touching on as well. Like it is not that we, thank you for noticing. It is, we deserve these just as much as anyone else. The same way our, anyone with less privilege, that doesn't mean they shouldn't have it. They deserve it just as much, and relentlessly like holding yourself to that standard and continually trying to assert that helps. And I recognize that's a shift for a lot of people, but I've been trying to do that, and it's changed the way I think about a lot of things.
Nick, thank you for saying that. And I want to bring it all the way back to Tina's first comment about advocacy for her son in the classroom. Your advocacy is filling out a 504 plan, right? This is give my son the right to be educated in a safe and secure way, in the way that works for him. I'm suggesting that we as an advocacy community change that conversation to say, why shouldn't my son have the ability to take care of himself in the situation where he needs to be? And put the onus on other people to take away our rights as opposed to on us to defend them. That is the shift I want to see our type 1 organizations take. That's the shift I want our community to make. And it won't work unless all of us start, frankly, holding ourselves accountable to this change in dynamic. I'm tired of asking for rights.
Yeah.
You need to explain to me why I don't deserve them. Sorry, this election has made me very activist.
We're saying we've all become radicals in the last couple of years, but thank you, Jake, and thank you, Nick, because I think that really wraps this session up with a awesome little ending that advocacy starts from inside. I might go all yoga with you guys right now, but it really starts with that self-worth of saying like, I deserve this. And like Jake said, asking, why don't I deserve this? And asking why. Awesome. Well, we're at 12:01. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope that you've taken one step, or you're going to climb that ladder one more time in your advocacy journey today. And be sure to look up T1 International. Shameless plug. We're doing some cool things in Washington State. And if you want to know more about how you can get involved, I'll put my email in the chat over here and you can email me because we'll have some actionable items too. But remember the ACA, if that's one thing you leave today, figuring out how you can influence your circle to support the ACA, because that's happening right now. Okay, everyone enjoy the rest of your weekend.